leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host for this podcast, joined today by Jonathan Fleming, Executive Chairman of Curalis and Enclear Therapies, former President and CEO of Q-State Biosciences and former Managing Partner of Oxford Bioscience Partners, an international venture capital firm specialized in life science investments. Jonathan has been founding, financing, and operating breakthrough life science companies for over 30 years in the USA, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. During his career, he has raised more than $1 billion for early-stage investment funds that made more than 200 investments, resulting in over 20 IPOs and 40 M&A events. Jonathan has been the CEO, chairman of the board, and director of many public and private companies. He has worked with 7 different Nobel laureates to create and build companies based upon their work. Jonathan has been a senior lecturer at Sloan School since 2002, where I met him in an incredible class on strategic decision in life science. Jonathan, I am so honored and excited to have you with me today.
Thank you, Naji.
First, I would love, Jonathan, to hear your personal story. What's in between the lines of this impressive and inspiring career, and more specifically in life sciences?
So my career has really been driven by a challenge that was given to me by my stepmother when I was in my late teens. And she told me that I had somehow managed to be the luckiest person on earth, that I had gotten 4 aces. And I had been born a tall, white, male American with a good brain and a good body. And I owed society every day of my life to figure out how to pay back that good fortune. And it took me some time to figure out exactly how I wanted to do that. I did know, because I was growing up at a time when Silicon Valley was rising up and the idea of technology and entrepreneurship was just starting to take hold, that I wanted to be somebody who helped influence the use of technologies for the purposes of good in the world, and tried to keep their use for bad purposes. And I think, as we all understand, whether it's the internet or the companies that the tech companies or biotech or nuclear power, there's all kinds of positive and negative uses of technology and innovation. I just wanted to somehow vaguely to be involved in how that got allocated. And I originally thought I'd be doing that as a member of the government in some agency. And I originally went to school at political science and public administration, thinking that was going to be my way forward. And what I really found was that let's just say the energy and aggressiveness with which I want to do things is not well suited to government work. And I'm a big believer in picking projects based on their cost-benefit analysis and on their merits, and killing things that don't have merits. And that's absolutely not the way that government works. So I determined very early in my career that was not going to be my path. I was very, very lucky very early, right after graduate school, to be placed in a situation where I had an opportunity both to meet this concept of venture capital when it was brand new in the world in 1984 and 1985, and also to meet this brand new industry that was just emerging, just becoming visible as to what its power and potential could be, which is the power of genetic engineering, today the industry that we call biotechnology. And the moment that I connected with it, I thought, oh my goodness, this biotechnology can be exactly what I was searching for. It has the power to heal the world. It has the power to feed the world. It has the power to clean up the world. But obviously, those same powers can be used in some very negative ways. Think of biowarfare, for example. And you really want to make sure that you're using it for the right things and not for the wrong things. And so I now had my technology that I knew was going to be sort of the basis of my career. And I had just met in venture capital the agency or the method by which I could allocate capital to good things and away from bad things. So then all that remained was to learn how to convince people who have a lot of capital, and initially that's usually wealthy families and people who've made their money as entrepreneurs, and then ultimately corporations and insurance companies and pension funds to give me the money and to let me then allocate it into companies that were doing things that I thought were going to make a big difference in the world. And it was amazing to me that you could do that, that you could actually go get someone to give you $100 million that you could then go start companies with that would do really important things. And then lo and behold, if you got it right, if you actually succeeded, you made money at it and you could pay back your investors and make a little yourself. To me, that was like a miracle. When it finally hit me, like, wow, this industry gives me the chance to do exactly what I set out to do as a teenager. It was an epiphany and a revelation, and I never looked back. I think the other key part of the story is, and it's really important to my story, and I think to most successful people, is you have to meet the right mentors along the way. Clearly, I'm not an expert in biotechnology. I had to meet people, some of the Nobel winners that I worked with, but most importantly, a couple of the older senior managing partners of places that I worked at, who really mentored me, coached me, taught me the right way to do things and not the wrong way. And so it was this combination of having, by searching, met both the technology that would be the basis of my career, the way to deploy it, and then the people who really taught me well to be what I am.
Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing part of your story. Before my first question, you said a couple of times I was lucky, and you talked about luck. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear your perspective about luck in career and leadership life.
Well, I do think that we are all given certain cards at the beginning of our life through our genes and through the circumstances of where we are born and the time in history and where we are born. And those are not things that we have any influence over. You either have the luck of good cards or not good cards. And like a good poker game, you can trade some of your cards back. You can change certain things about yourself or improve certain things about yourself, work on certain things, but you do have certain fundamental traits or physical, mental, emotional skills. I always wanted to be a sports star when I was growing up. I have no coordination whatsoever. People cringe when they watch me play sports. And then, I was very interested in music, and I played an instrument when I was a child. And then I realized I had no musical talent whatsoever. I could appreciate it maybe, but no, that is not for you. I realized I'm not going to be one of those movie stars you see because I'm not good looking enough. And so you sort of zero in on the things that you can do. And I think I was very lucky to be given the traits that I was, the advantages that I had. And I'm very conscious of those advantages, so that when I feel good about the accomplishments of my career or of the companies that we started, I'm also very mindful that I worked very hard and I deserve all of the accolades I get, but I was lucky. I was lucky in how I got to start and where I got to start, and the traits that I was given to work with. And I just think a good leader hopefully is humble enough and mindful enough to understand. I was blessed with these things. It's not that I was so great. I was sort of given them, and it's my responsibility to use them in ways that are positive for the world. Now that's my perspective. It's certainly not shared by many of the political leaders of my country in Washington, but it is how I was raised and how I think about it.
And that's such a powerful perspective. And I love how you framed it, from the luck, you kept on looking on those cards for you to foster this luck and obviously bring a huge impact today in the world through what you do. You've been part of several biotechs, as we talked, since their real birth, and part of many drugs that has been developed, changing people's lives today. What makes you know that a company since the very beginning will be successful?
You don't. I have to tell you that we all go through a huge process of analysis and due diligence, and you look at 100 things for every one that you do. But quite honestly, in each of the funds that I managed, halfway through the fund, when we'd made all the investments, I would gather usually every 90 days, all of the partners, and we would score the investments, which are the ones you think are going to be your winners, which are going to be your okay, which are going to be your losers, because you always want to feed your winners and starve your losers. You got it wrong every time, like every single time. Like it was just really hard to predict. Circumstances change, worlds change, competition changes, technology changes, FDA changes, and things don't work that you think are going to work. We had the speaker last night, and he is one of the smartest people in the world, and no one does more diligence on a program before he starts it. And he was dead certain that his clinical program would work. Dead certain. It didn't work. Right? He had to go back and report to the world, I was wrong. And that happens so many times in developing drugs and in biology that you just are humbled by. When we started human genome science, it's like, find the gene that causes the disease, fix the gene, fix the human. We'll have pretty much healthcare wrapped up in 10 years. Like, what a shock to learn that no. And then you find out, it's going to be all about gene expression. So start a company, solve gene expression, related to disease, figure out how to drug it. We'll have disease all cleaned up in 10 or 15 years. What a joke. So you just get humbler and humbler and humbler and humbler as you get along. But generally, what most people will tell you when they set out to do this is that you obviously need to have the right people that are going to problem solve through all of the different things that are going to go wrong at each of the 75 steps that you have to conquer to make a successful drug. You're did you get the right target? Did you, are you, relating to the right patient population? Can your molecule, can you pick a molecule that can survive preclinical development? Because most of them don't. And then once you get it through there, did you actually make one that has commercial drug-like properties? And, most people don't make it through that. And, and then just each step of the way. And as we learned from Biogen, you can get all the way to FDA approval and still massively mess up, even after the FDA has approved your drug. So it's really hard to know because it takes place over such a long period of time. And it's interesting, the people who've bought my companies like Roche or Lilly or Lundbeck, the things that they ended up keeping and the things they ended up throwing away are not what they paid me the money for. Now, Lilly paid me $300 million for a drug that lasted 6 months and $20 million for a platform they use every day of their existence. You just don't know. So it is something where you get people both in your team and in your investor group and in your you're a science group who can go the distance in solving problems, keeping their eyes on the prize, and it is really hard to know in advance which ones are going to be. Again, in biotechnology, you're very dependent on the stock market to produce outsized returns for you. Predicting what the stock market's going to fall in love with and why is really pretty challenging. And when they're going to stop falling in love with it, right? So they fell in love with immune oncology, and a lot of people made a lot of money there. I'm not sure they'll make a lot of drugs. They fall in love with gene therapy recently. I'm more hopeful there that will actually lead to some new breakthrough therapies. But again, if you took a poll of the top 10 venture capitalists, top 10 biotech execs, top 10 scientists in our country, and said, pick the next 10 breakthrough drugs, they'd be way more than 50% wrong. Every one of them.
And well, that
was
was
the best of the best.
That was one of the questions I had for you. We talked a lot about the double uncertainty that is very particular for our industry, right? Uncertainty of business and uncertainty of biology, obviously. And I was going to ask you if you look forward to tell us a story of a breakthrough that you see coming from one of the biotechs you're working for. So I don't know, now that you've said 50% will be wrong, do you want to predict one?
I can tell you where I think I'm very optimistic in an area that has been really a wasteland for a long, long time, and that would be in neurodegeneration. And the reason is that in pharmacological medicine, like using pharmacology to treat disease, in every area where our industry has been successful, it has been through a polypharmacy approach. When you go to your cardiologist, this is you have high blood pressure, you have this, you have that, you almost never get a single drug. I have very mild blood pressure, and they put me on two generics. And it's almost always, they say, well, we want you to do a this and a that, because we found that this and a that together work better. When you are mental health patients, like they mix and match the different therapies. So I'm going to give you a little upper and a little mood stabilizer. And it's kind of a bespoke cocktail for each patient. In cancer, the cancer that killed my mother when I was 5, breast cancer, metastatic breast cancer, today a young woman who was diagnosed with a lesion of the breast has a 93% chance of a complete cure. 93%. It's those darn triple negatives that we can't get yet, but the others, if you get it early, she's going to be fine. And as you very well know, what do? We do a series of tests to decide, like which path are you going to follow, and then they're put on a polytherapy, right? You get CHOP-R, you get this plus that, or you get that plus this, right? And the whole complexity in medicine today is about figuring out which combination is going to work. But the idea is that breast cancer patients are very different. We can put them in 9 different buckets, right? Triple positive, triple negative, whatever the mix is. And then we can sequence the tumor, sequence the patient, and make it even more precise. So now let's go to neurodegenerative medicine. Up until now, everyone has said Alzheimer's. Actually, the chance that I knew when I started my first neuroscience company in 1989 that was not true. We knew then, but people kept saying, I'm developing a drug for Alzheimer's. And I knew then. I remember this Eric Kandel, the guy who won the Nobel for memory, saying, Jonathan, this was 1994. There are 59 different genetic paths already identified to become demented. That was 28 years ago, right? So we know lots more. The stupid freaking industry still goes after beta amyloid for everybody. how stupid can you be? It's just stupid. It's just raw stupidity. I'm sorry. You have the answer plainly in front of you from oncology, from cardiovascular medicine, from mental health. The path forward is clear. So what had to happen? Finally, the neurologists started sequencing their patients. And all of a sudden, we'd like, oh, Parkinson's disease is not a single disease. It's at least 5 different diseases, right? You can get it this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. They converge at the end of the day by you losing your dopaminergic neurons. But they start in different places through different mutations. You can go up there and get them. But the GBA mutation patient is going to be different than the LRRK2 mutation patient. They're going to be different patients with different medications administered in different ways, different times. You have to select out that patient and give them something that's specific to their mechanism of disease. So finally starting to happen in Parkinson's, finally starting to happen really in ALS, and those will be the first 2. Now, word of caution, why you can't predict success. If you had asked me and every person like me, everyone, 4 years ago, what's the first one that's going to fall, Jonathan? Huntington's, for sure. We've got the gene, we've got the technology, we've got the patients, we know what we're doing. So far, we are all O for everything. Roche is dead. Like Wave is dead. Takeda is dead. No one has cracked that sucker. And if you listen to what I just said, it ought to work perfectly in Huntington's, but it doesn't. So we still have more to figure out. But the basic idea in Huntington's, Parkinson's, and ALS is we are going to find our patient groups, the SOD1s, the C9orf72s, are the 2 first patient groups in ALS. But if you really want to see how this works, look at Vertex and what they did with CF, right? Their first drug was exactly 4% of the whole patient population. Second drug was like 8%. You combine them, get like 24%. And they had a third drug. So now they're up to 30-something% of the patients. And they had a fourth drug, and they're now up to like 70 or 80% something of the patients. They're going to get 100%, but it's going to take them like 6 drugs to do it in multiple combinations, right? So this is where the next big breakthroughs will occur, and these things that are, we're making people live much longer. They're not dying of heart attacks. They're not dying of cardiovascular disease unless they live in the South, and they're not. They're either going to die of gunshot wounds, COVID, or cardiovascular disease or diabetes because they got it all down there. And up here, lots of people living late into their lives, and then they get these things, and we're going to be able to stop some of them. And just like with CF in the beginning, 4% of the patients, 8% of the patients. Alzheimer's will be the last to fall because it is the longest and hardest to measure clinically. ALS is really easy. Parkinson's is kind of hard because, as you know, you have this first phase where you can get L-DOPA and then go years being just fine. And then you have the part where L-DOPA starts to diminish in its effectiveness, and then all hell breaks loose. So choosing strategically where you want to intervene, really very challenging strategic decision. Not one I would want to make, but that's where the excitement, that's where the breakthroughs are going to be.
Definitely, and I can see the excitement, the passion, and hopefully, all we do every day is trying to bring those for patients to be better. Pivoting, on leadership in all those stages, right? Like there is the passion, there is why we're doing it. There is definitely resilience, as you shared. Like you bet on things, you go big, and then it goes away. What are your perspective from a leadership standpoint as a biotech leader or pharma leader, or when you're investing in some of those people? What are the things you look for?
Well, the first thing is that human beings grow and mature and develop, and they need different kinds of support at different stages of their development. So too do companies. And so in the beginning, you're selling the future, and you're trying to get people to believe that they can accomplish something pretty impossible. And most of what you're doing is inventing and problem solving. And that's one style of leadership. It's a very inspirational style of leadership, right? And it's one where you're going to try to get people to work 50% more hours than they're paid for, and say thank you, and be thinking about it in the shower, and be thinking about it at dinner. Like, then all of a sudden, eureka, I've got it. And then you get into the stage where the need to do shortcuts and breakthroughs and leapfrogs is not so good. And maybe you don't want to be focusing so much on that. And now you really need to check some boxes, right? And you need to do some careful work. And that work is, for the first time, not in a small group of 20 people who are, the small group of people who are going to take that beachhead or climb that mountain. Now it's a bigger group of people, probably involving some CROs, some other people outside, and start coordinating things, managing your project. Still very much within the bounds of the first group, but they have to learn how to go from one person doing 8 jobs to 8 people doing 8 jobs, with each person being the best at that job. And that is a difficult transition for a company. You can kind of keep that going through the early clinical development. And again, a little company with the traditional kind of little company management could probably hang in there through the early stage clinical phase 1, phase 2. But after that, you really, if you have a program that is really going to go from a proof of concept to a registration trial to registration to trying to launch it in a way that is successful both for patients, payers, and the system, you need a very different kind of management and a very different kind of organization. And the same kind of brilliant genius that got you started kind of gets in your way, right? As you go further down the development curve. And so now you have a much larger organization, hundreds of people, right? Who maybe even thousands of people. All of a sudden you have to start thinking about, I have to start talking to these Englishmen and these Germans, these Italians, these Frenchmen, and stuff about Europe. And then, there's Japan and Asia. What the heck do I do about China? And these payers are all giving me fits about how much I want to charge for my drug. And so the kind of executive leadership that balances all of these different stakeholders and constituencies and their needs, and comes up with an algorithm that says, this is the path forward that we're going to take for these reasons, that's a completely different skill set than the leadership that produced the creative act. Because we're also in a creative process, but it's not science creativity. It's I guess you call it commercial creativity, but it is a different kind of leadership where you have to be, so you certainly have to have the skill of picking the right people to lead all these different functions, right? So you have incredible people. You are balancing very complex operations and making sure that they all sync up on time. And you're trading really different, price. I was talking to the Amgen people in preparation for the PCSK9 class, homework I did for the class. They still talk about that, 2014 to 2017, they felt they had this hugely important drug on their hand. And they had a huge debate in their company about how to price it, how to position it. And they got it wrong, and they had to redo it, 5 years later, and now they've got it right. But the things they're doing now, they had on their game plan in 2014. But the senior management was thinking about maximizing a different variable, which was profit for the quarterly income statement. And what they were going to tell analysts, people at Amgen were thinking, how can we get the drug to the most people? Right. And so the leadership at the top of Amgen at that time, at the time of Biogen when they did Adahem, if this guy who just lost his job, Naji, had said, you know what, this drug is pretty iffy. I think we got a lot of work left to do with this drug. You know what we're going to do? We're going to sell this drug at cost plus 20% until we really establish how good it is. Don't you think he'd have lots of people paying for his drug and lots of people on his drug, and he'd still have his job? It's one of the single stupidest strategic decisions I've ever seen in 35 years. To price that drug where they did. It's like beyond insanely stupid. And so it is a different kind of leadership at that stage that could really assess the environment, assess all these different players in this three-dimensional game of chess, and make the right moves. And that's a whole different set of skills than it took to start the company at the beginning, or to manage that project at the beginning. And so it is important to, if you're going to be successful, to match the right leadership style to the situation that you're in, and to make your decisions based on the right parameters for the situation that you're in. There's a time to be a profit maximizer. There's a time to be a broader set of criteria maximizer. It'll come back in profit later. And I guess the leadership skill that I'm trying to describe is awareness of context that you're operating. It's really hard. Imagine the poor CEO of Disney. He's just trying to do the right thing, right by his employees, what he feels personally, for his company. Really hard to get that right, isn't it?
So now I would give you one word, and I want your reaction to it.
Okay.
So we talked about it a lot. So now a reaction to the word leadership.
Critical. It's the critical element. By that I mean, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a community project, whether it's a little company or a big company, all of us have in our experience the difference in what happens to an organization when you make a change from an ineffective to an effective leader. And people go like, oh my God, it's the same company, but look at it now. And so the thing about leadership is that it's the critical element of success.
What about VC?
My reaction. Gratitude that I found it and could use it to serve my purposes. Concern that the industry has sort of lost its way.
What about chairman?
The most fun I've had. I work with the most wonderful young men and women in these management teams. But at the end of the day, after we decide what to do, they have to go do it. I go home and pet the dog, and I'm fine. So I think it's the role I've really come in the last couple of years to enjoy a lot. But it also is one, just as what I was saying, I'm going to be replacing myself as a chairman in my ALS company, because they're going to be bringing 3 drugs into the clinic in the next 12 months. 3 big, complicated programs. And their infrastructure has got to grow from 24 to probably, 2 or 3 times that minimum, right? And this company has actually got 20 Lilly employees that work for it like a CRO, because one of the programs is a Lilly drug. But the young CEO, who's done a brilliant job under my tutelage in the startup phase, now has a very different kind of management and company building and program building exercise in front of him. He should have a chairman who's seen that movie before. Like I never stick around when companies get to the part where they're big and they're public, and other people come in and pay a lot more attention to issues of infrastructure and size and complexity that I could be a good director for, but it's not my particular skill or expertise or focus. So another key piece of leadership is also knowing when to go. There's a big debate going on right now, because there's a senator from California who's very beloved. She's been around for 30 years, but she's getting demented and she needs to go. Like, you need to know when to go. It's part of also being a good leader.
And the last word I'd love your reaction to is spread love in organizations.
I love to spread love. People are very afraid of it. I'm learning. I have to learn how to do this now in a different way. It's more challenging to spread love now than before. Spreading love is way harder now, because there's this identity thing that you're supposed to do, which is just contrary to every part of my being. I love everybody. I don't even see the color, gender stuff that people get so, I have a Black mother. I have Black friends. We just, I don't sit there and check myself and say like, oh, I can't say that because it would offend them. I don't use the N word, but pretty much every other word I do. Or, if I say like, that is one dumb Black guy, I will say it. But but also as a dumb white guy or a dumb guy or a dumb yellow guy, usually I won't use the color. But the only point is, I think it's way more challenging now for particularly older males who are used to leading with a very emotion-driven, feeling-driven, love-driven style. It's not that you stop doing that. It's that you have to learn new tricks as an old dog. And old dogs are not great at new tricks, but I've had to learn like how you do that. And I think it is very possible, but it is just a different style. Need of your employees, of your direct reports to get that love and support is even greater than there was before. This world is so crazy. People are so anxious. Have so much uncertainty about the right path forward. My son out in Colorado, he quit 4 jobs in 2 years. He's utterly miserable human being. He finally found a boss that he will go through brick walls for. This boss said, like, back up, put your head down, and straight at that brick wall until you get through it. He'll do it now. He'll work nights and weekends for this guy. This is his dad. I know he's working nights and weekends too. And he had 4 straight companies and bosses where they were so far from that ideal, and he couldn't. Like when I was growing up, you had a crappy boss or a crappy company that, no one promised you a rose garden. You just go to work, suck it up, stop complaining, do your job, put the meat on the table, get up, do it again. That's how I was raised, right? So he's not raised that way. He's like, I need to be fulfilled. I need to be appreciated. I need to be this. I need to be that. When he didn't get it, he quit. Then he finally got a boss who spoke his love language. And now he's like this happy little camper, right? So and again, men and women have really different approaches to this. What works for my son and what works for my daughter, I know from just listening to them talk about their professional careers, 2 different approaches, right? And so you just have to be so much more sophisticated. The next door neighbor to me is the Harvard Business School professor, Susan David, who's made the term emotional intelligence very popular. She earns a lot of money going around lecturing about emotional intelligence, but there is a lot to that concept of a leader having to be like, okay, with these millennials, I can't tell you how many CEOs I've talked to said, like, how do you manage a millennial? They're like unmanageable. It's like, what are we going to do with this generation? And the men and women are very different in that generation. So you just have to be way more thoughtful and deliberate and less kind of instinctive, I think, as a leader than I was as a young leader. To think a lot more before I talk.
Well, and as you said, I think each one of us is different and react differently to things. And the underlying piece is really, when you said asking questions, I was thinking, yeah, well, you asked me questions when we first met. But since it comes from a place of genuine curiosity, I feel you can ask any question, right? Mm-hmm. Because you deeply care and you're trying to understand and learn, and it comes from a place of love. So yeah,
and people's stories are so interesting. If you listen, there always is this. You don't need to read novels. You don't need to watch TV. Just find someone like you and say, like, oh wow, you started in Lebanon. And if you know anything at all about the world, you know that Lebanon has had a really unfortunate history, right? And so it must be really different from my childhood to grow up in Lebanon. And so that's interesting, right? And you can learn about a different path. And then it makes you appreciate more of the things that I open with. Like, wow, I got to be pretty lucky to grow up in a place that wasn't at war and wasn't at this. People weren't bombing each other and doing this and that and the other to each other. How lucky is that?
Thanks again, Jonathan, for playing the game of those words. Any final word of wisdom for healthcare leaders around the world?
I don't know that I could summarize it better than Doug Fambro did at the end of his lecture, or during part of his lecture yesterday, in which I think a healthcare leader is in this really special place where they have to care for the needs of the patient. They have a moral, ethical, legal responsibility to the patient, and they have a moral, ethical, legal responsibility to their investors and shareholders. And they have a moral, ethical, and legal responsibility to their employees. And in healthcare, where people have strong emotional feelings about the right of everyone to receive a certain minimum level of care, the prices you set and the profits you make have to be carefully balanced against the needs of these other stakeholders in a very sensitive way. And so leading with love and leading with care is not just something that you say in order to make everybody feel good. The only way you're going to be a successful leader in healthcare is if you really, to the core of your being, feel and believe in those values of the patient and making some group of patients better with what you're doing. If you don't truly, deeply, sincerely believe that, you are in the wrong place and you will fail because you will not make the right decisions. Doesn't mean that the profit motive or taking care of your employees are not equally important, but there is a balance between those three things that is unique to healthcare, and it's what makes it very special.
What an amazing way to wrap up our conversation. Thank you so much again, Jonathan, for being with me today.
It was really fun to get to know you, and I hope we stay in touch.
Thank you all for listening to Spread Love in Organization podcast. Drop us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Connect with us on SpreadLoveIO.com or on LinkedIn. Most importantly, spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.